Special thanks goes to our gold sponsor, Accenture.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Super thrilled of, I don't know, discussing about seeing so many interesting conversations, so much excitement around. My secret goal with this talk, that is not going to not be secret anymore after this, is to show how Reason integrates with the editor and hopefully, well, see a little bit what we can do today and hopefully get an idea of what we can do in the future. My name is Javi. I work for a company called Webflow, doing front-end infrastructure. I also contributed a little bit to the Camel language server. Everything started very randomly, like many other stories that we've been hearing. Yeah, so over time, I've been thinking about like what I like to do with my work, and I think I like working on boundaries. I find boundaries very interesting. If you think about like coastal cities or border cities, is where there's more like interaction between different people. Like more. I think that when you combine different things together, there's more chances that good things happen, right? So in technology, we use boundaries all the time. And one of these boundaries could be like a programming language. So the first question that I have is, what are the interfaces of a programming language? I don't know if you've thought about it, but whenever I started seeing like how Reason was evolving, I started thinking more and more about this. Also, some comments and mentions from Jordan, Wok, and Chenglu about like all the syntax debates made me think a lot about how syntax in programming languages is kind of like the same thing as UIs, and how everyone has an opinion. When a designer shows, I have had this conversation with designers many times when they say everyone has an opinion about design, and I always feel a bit bad for designers because it's a tough job, like everyone is going to have an opinion, and syntax is kind of like the same thing but for languages. I'm personally very happy that Reason, like the community and the core contributors also had the courage to kind of like put that change in motion, the syntax, adapted more to JavaScript. And this also relates to how these boundaries that we are talking about, they are all about empathy, that we have been talking a lot today, and about like putting yourself in the mind of the other, and like instead of like scratching your own back, scratching the other people back. So if we consider like the syntax, the documentation, for example, could be part of the interface of a programming language, the build system, etc. What would you say is the editor in all that schema in all that interface? I thought about this tool while contributing to Camel language server and the VS Code extension, and I see the editors as a catalytic interface, or like an amplifying interface, which means editors take everything that is on the underlying language and the underlying language, syntax, documentation, tools, etc., and they can like maximize that to make it way more useful for the people using it at the end. This is something that Microsoft, for example, understood perfectly, I think. And there's a lot to learn, a lot of lessons to learn from TypeScript, from F# to, I mean, the F# with C# analogy, it's very interesting from the Reason standpoint too, but that's probably another topic. But what I want to say is that it's the editor for me, like it's a critical part of making the programming languages accessible to developers who. We are people at the end, humans too. Like we focus a lot on like user experience, etc. But developer experience, it's as important, or well, at least as important as the user experience, right? So editors are like a magnifying glass, let's say. So they have a lot of power, but with great power also comes great responsibility. And if the editor, if this magnifying glass interface somehow doesn't, like, it can also hide things from behind. And if these things that we are hiding, they are unexpected, then it can lead to confusing situations like, hey, why did reformat stop working on this file? You know, like this happened to me sometimes. Like suddenly, someone I saw on Discord too. Like suddenly you have something and it's not working. Like the editor is not saying anything, and then you're just confused. Yeah, I think editors should be like as transparent and like honest between codes as possible. And I think that potentially also there's the other side of the story, and with reason too, which is not only giving developers like superpowers to build these tools that we're building, but also making them happy. And Sean Grove, I don't know where he is, he has an amazing talk about finding joy in programming, which I recommend very much, where he expands on that. But I think we can like make our job better and like, yeah, not only superpowers, but you know, be happy, you know, enjoy what you're doing. It's like we can make like these guys when they found out like they don't need to add annotations anymore. And look how happy Spiderman is dancing. This for me was kind of like a crucial moment in my exploration through Reason because I really disliked to add type annotations. It was like, because it's redundant. You have to add the same information over and over. And I also dislike compiling code in my head. It's like, I want to think about like, am I using the right data models? Or is this UI, I don't know, maybe I can provide some feedback to the designer to improve it. Or, you know, like meaningful creative activities that we can do. And I don't want to compile if that can be done by the machine. So that brings us to the state of the editor today. We are going to do an overview of the language server architecture, and then things that have happened in the last year or two. It would be very hard to talk about the language server without talking about one person that is not here today. He couldn't come, unfortunately, but Darren Morrison, also known as Free Broccolo, who has done an amazing work, in my opinion, on the language server, which is powering, as we will see, all the editor integration. So I want to take a sec for a round of applause for Darren, because if you're using the editor, you're using his code. And it's good stuff. And the thing is, like, there are so many features that I don't know. I'm still amazed when I'm using it and like looking at the code. It's crazy what he built. Yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, as we will see, but we are already in a very good place, I think. So the language server architecture is like this is the side from if you look at it from the editor point of view. So we have there all these 5 editors, and there's a protocol that is called the language server protocol. We will briefly talk about this, but essentially it's like there's a unified interface for all the editors to communicate with the Camel language server. Essentially it's like a remote, what is it? Remote procedure call. So essentially like sending a message saying, like a function with params saying, I want to like give me the definition of this symbol. And then the language server responds with the location in the code base, which I think it's a great example of how a good architecture can enable, like facilitate the integration of the single abstraction into many different places. The language server protocol was originated by Microsoft, but then like many other companies and individuals have contributed. You can look about it more in this page. So. The protocol is just like the definition, and the Camel language server is one implementation of the language server protocol. There are many others for many other languages like Rust, Swift, Python, or. Now we're looking at the other side of the the equation, which is the Camel language server is the one that communicates with all the individual tools or applications, binaries, that are performing many different kind of jobs. So the language server kind of adapts to each of these individual tools, communicate with them in like different ways. And it kind of like exposes one single interface with the editors. So we have here reformat, OCaml Merlin for OCaml Merlin that does a ton of work too, and this was mainly the work of Let Dev. I forgot his name now, but also another individual that has contributed a great piece for the editor integration to get better. OCaml Find, OCP-Indet, BSB, and ESI. There can be more in this list in the future. So supported editors are essentially these 5: VS Code, Atom, Vim, Emacs, Sublime Test are all using the OCaml language server. IDEA editor is off language server right now, but I think it's mainly because they wanted some particular Windows support, so they are creating their own integration, but hopefully this changes in the future. One reason why I like to contribute to the OCaml language server is that it's one single repo, if you want, but the impact it has is kind of like 5 times. So it kind of like, I get the feeling that I spend not much time with it, but the work that I do is kind of like helping a lot of people, so I get the most out of my time. There's also another benefit, and I think this is very important to be discussed about, is that many of the tools we are talking about, like reformat, buckle script, etc., they are pretty heavy engineering, and there's not that many people working on them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to help at this level with, like, OCaml language server, by the way, is written in TypeScript right now, but there's a lot of opportunities to contribute and help these people that are working, let's say, in the underlying layers to like expose their work to the users. So I think, yeah, it's meaningful, and it's a good. It's not like maybe as complicated if you have tried to like contribute to buckle script. So the language server kind of like it relates more if you come from a web development experience. It's easier. So the features are essentially this list. I'm going to show, instead of like going one by one, I'm going to show this GIF. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'm going to like mention some of them, but it's essentially okay. So we have here like auto completion, documentation integrated with the editor. This for me is one of the killer features. Is like the type inference built into the editor as well. You can jump to definition. You can hover to see the types. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, for me the experience is really amazing. Like hover to see the type signatures, etc. There's also things like, for example, backlog script is generating Merlin files on the background, which for me at least I have tried also writing some OCaml, and writing the Merlin file is yet another configuration file that you have to write manually. So backlog script takes care of that for you, and this also is leveraged by the editor. So it's like, if you see, there's a pattern of like layers on top of layers on top of layers, and like there's a lot of room to participate if you feel like. So this past year, also more tools have been integrated, like BSB. You have the output of BSB being piped into the editor system. Reformat as well. ESI has some integration. There was kind of like a community effort to integrate Windows support via WSL. This was pretty exciting to see. Yeah, this is another. So here, for example, Merlin is failing. Now I'm trying to format. I see the reformat syntax error from here, so I know exactly where that is happening. Now I can reformat properly. Now I'm going to rename this variant to awesome teacher. OK, Merlin says everything is OK, but then if I save the document, BuckleScript, one of the differences between BuckleScript and Merlin is that Merlin can handle the one file where you're working on, but it doesn't have, for technical reasons, the whole picture of your project. But BuckleScript, as it's compiling the project itself, like Merlin is not a compiler, BuckleScript is, so it has the full view of your project. And for me, this is such a boost when you have to refactor some code, because like you change some data structure and suddenly you see all the places where it's being used, which is very, very useful. So what comes next is things, as always, pick this with a grain of salt. You know, these are ideas that are being discussed, etc. But you know, it's not like a roadmap or anything official. Rewriting of the language server in Camel. This is something that has been, there's been some discussions, and it might happen at some point because Camel provides more tools to type some of the parts of the language server. Improving in editor feedback if tools binaries are missing. So essentially, like if you're missing one of these tools that we were seeing before, get better feedback. Native Windows support without WSL. Facilitate creation of new projects. This is something that Adam, I think, is doing, thanks to Alex Fedosev. I don't know if he's around, but they have already some kind of like new templates. It would be great to have that in all the editors. And this is kind of like a crazy idea, but a preview mode that allows you to translate between OCaml and Reason, so you can work in an OCaml project, but write Reason and the other way around. There could be some exploration around that. Renaming symbols across files, extracting a function. This is essentially tools that help us refactor projects better. There's a lot of opportunities there too. So we were discussing about boundaries and empathy and how the editor can help us work better. And one of the main pain points that I've seen in Discord and during yesterday as well in the workshop is about bindings. You know, like we have to write bindings. You know, we have to interact with JavaScript, and it's. I personally kind of like it because it's kind of like a puzzle, but it's also it could get tedious after a while, etc. So in the real world, we will have to write bindings, like for the foreseeable future. You know, it's like maybe at some point there are new apps that are starting and they are only in Reason. The bindings of the browser, they are already written. So, but today, if we are realistic and pragmatic, and I think we are, if you have convinced your manager to use Reason, which that's also a topic for another conference, like ReasonConf or the convince. If you have done that, then you find yourself with a JavaScript application where you will probably have to write a lot of bindings. I've been working on something that I wanted to show today. A word of warning, it's an experiment, so take it as that. And another thing I wanted to mention is, so this thing that you are going to see today, it wouldn't be possible without the work that the Flow team did first, and also Chenglu. I don't have enough words of appreciation for Chenglu and all the help he has provided throughout these last months. But he had a project. One of the many things he did was a project called JSON, where he was trying essentially to convert React components into from JavaScript to Reason. So I started fiddling with that, and at some point I got super overwhelmed because that's like a very, very ambitious goal. So I started this small tool called Rebind, where I have here, let's see. I have here a JavaScript file, which is very simple, like just a declaration with some nano function. So test input CC1. So if I do this, it only spits out like some binary, we don't know what it is, but if we pipe this through reformat, and we say parse binary, oops, reformat, parse binary, and print reason. What? Sorry. OK, so if we pipe that into reformat, then we can see it's generating an abstract type called nano, and it's generating the module. I don't know if you see enough, but so the idea was like take JSON, which, like as I said, like Chenglu has been working on, and use that specifically just for bindings, like nothing else, no JavaScript output, nothing, just the bindings. And then like the next step that I was thinking is, how can we use the editor as the magnifying glass to get the most out of this? So I have here, this is an example of the Stripe documentation, which is creating some customer or something. What if I could like, what if I could take this and say, OK, reason, get bindings. And then I go to a reason file, and I say insert bindings, and I get all these by default. This is an experiment. This is also like, thanks to like, yeah, as I said, building layers on top of like, how do you say, standing on the shoulders of giants. And I don't know, I'm going to publish later on the repository. If you see me around, don't be shy, like ask questions about anything. One good thing too is that thanks to this approach that Jason was taking of like parsing JavaScript into an abstract syntax tree, and then he's working at the syntax tree level, we can open, like I can have my Camel module, and like if you're like you prefer Camel, it works too. Like it's the same syntax, so I'm getting all this for free, you know. It's like you get all this for free, thanks to all this work that has been done before. So, oops. Okay, so how can you contribute? You might be thinking there are plenty of things to do on the Camel language server. There are plenty of glitches still. There are many ideas, as you saw, that can be done in the future. There are things that we can bring from like Microsoft and TypeScript. Like I cannot insist on that, but TypeScript success is mainly based on the developer experience. And so yeah, like create issues, add suggestions, ask on Discord. You can like work in the editor that you want, on the extension, etc. So yeah, I'm super excited about like I feel there are a lot of good ingredients that are being cooked into this recipe called Reason, like solid engineering, a lot of empathy to inclusiveness, and yeah, like I'm very excited to see what will come next. So thank you very much. Here are some repos.